Welcome into the Door Report. It is episode 174. It is a Monday night, August 29th, 2022. We are powered by Alaco Finewood Floors. They are family owned and operated. They've been for 2 decades. Alaco Finewood Floors is Nashville and Middle Tennessee's choice for premium quality hardwood floors. Since 1995, Jimmy Alaco and his army of employees have embodied the approach of taking pride in one's craft and providing superior customer service, growing from a one-man shop to a team of 23 professionals who share the founder's passion for quality craftsmanship and customer satisfaction. If you're interested in contacting them, you can find their headquarters at 2505 Winford Avenue in Berry Hill. You can find them online at alacofinewoodfloors.com or call 615-356-0303. Alaco Finewood Floors, serving Middle Tennessee's hardwood flooring needs since 1995. Will, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm speechless, because I wasn't shocked by what happened Saturday night, but there was a part of me, and I think a part of a lot of Vanderbilt fans, that were pleasantly surprised by what went down Saturday night out in Honolulu. Vanderbilt dominates Hawaii 63-10, 63 points. It doesn't feel real to say that after a Vanderbilt game, but we will dive all the way into that game, Will, and we'll go through first half, the struggles of the first half, and kind of sitting there, what's going on, and then we'll get into the second half and the pure domination. And but we've got a new name for Vanderbilt Stadium, FirstBank Stadium. We'll talk about that. Kind of slipped through the cracks, I think, for a lot of people today. Wasn't national news or anything, but definitely locally here in Nashville got some buzz. But Will, how you feeling? How you feeling? You a little surprised after what happened Saturday night?
I'm surprised at the final score, and we'll get into the key points of the things that we both took away from the positives and the things to watch in the upcoming games of the season, including Elon next week. And I don't want to take anything away from this win, so I'm just going to get it out here in the early intro. That Hawaii team was as awful as I expected them to be, and maybe possibly even worse than I think we expected them to be after they got any type of fatigue built up on that roster because they were so thin. That was the worst FBS team I've ever seen. Now, last year, Vanderbilt would not have beaten them 63-10. So with that being said, there was tangible, definitive improvement on Vanderbilt's side. And that goes to show with some of the records that you were going to read off here in a second.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Well, I mean, Vanderbilt, I feel like they haven't had a game like this in a while. We all remember Franklin era. There was games where we'd be listing off, 10 different records that were broken or hadn't happened, since 30, 40, 50 years ago. So there's a lot of those. And I wasn't surprised to see that. And that's what happens when Vanderbilt gets to 63 points against an FBS opponent. But they looked a lot like, I feel like Innsworth High School could have beaten that Hawaii team on the Saturday. I mean, it was bad. It was really, really bad. I didn't, no one really, it was hard to tell in the first half. I mean, we knew what this Hawaii team was, but the second half, it really got real. I mean,
the initial sheen and freshness of the season wore off. I mean, you saw that early. It was like they were playing above their heads, and then reality set in. Just the athletes. What we say a lot about Vanderbilt, honestly, last season, that they were playing hard, but they were just out athleticized, if that is a word. I'm not sure if that's a word, but out athleticized by the opponent. And it's not a lack of effort, not a lack of necessarily coaching, but just player for player, the athletes are simply head and shoulders above. And that's what Vanderbilt looked like against Hawaii, which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's how they should look. They looked like an SEC team against a bad FBS opponent. That is a massive step in the right direction, because they certainly didn't look that way against Colorado State and UConn last year, who are both maybe not as bad as Hawaii this year.
No.
But we're both pretty bad. And you snuck by on last second field goals. So this is 100%, if not more percentage improvement over what this team would have done against this Hawaii team.
Well, I love the fact that you pointed out, let's get the Hawaii trash talk out of the way. We get it. We've got,
they're bad.
They're awful. We get that. That's all I've heard, I feel like, but we're going to dive into the Vanderbilt perspective and say, here's the improvement. Here's what we saw. And, we got it out of the way. Hawaii's bad. Okay. And we've got that out. No more of that. And then we have to be positive. I mean, you can't be anyone sitting here saying it's Hawaii. I don't give a crap. That's just, I don't understand that. So,
since 2-19 with a forfeit in the last 2 years. So like and the 2 wins were by a combined 2 last second field goals. So let's take any win against any opponent of any level, and let's take that as a massively positive sign.
Yeah. I mean, if they like 63 points against anyone, I mean, that's impressive in its own right. So we'll dive into a lot of it. This is definitely going to be a long episode. Will, the preview was not as long as we wanted it to be. So we're going to get into the recap here. Before we get to the recap, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at @door_report and Instagram door.report. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes. All right, let's recap Hawaii. All right, Will, I know as a little teaser there, we're not going to recap Hawaii yet, but let's get to this piece of news today. And we knew there was an announcement coming. At least most Vanderbilt fans did. That it was rumbling around the message boards, and you know how those rumors go and start swirling. Everybody's talking about it. It surfaced to Twitter, I think, late last night, and so a lot of people were looking forward to that. It was a really short press conference. It was Candace Lee and Clark Lee was there. A representative from FirstBank was there as well. But Vanderbilt signed a 10-year football stadium naming rights deal earlier today. 10 years. So we'll have to see, when that actually changes. But Will, this means one word: money. This is a huge financial benefit for Vanderbilt. Number one, you have a bank sponsoring your football stadium. So, I mean, that's literally what they do. Of course, Vanderbilt didn't disclose the financial components of the deal. I mean, they're a private university. They never do. I would imagine, though, it was pretty hefty. Robbie, I loved it. Robbie Weinstein asked the question. He was the scapegoat there. He asked the question, about, just asking how much was this, and Candace Lee was like that. We're not going to disclose that, but she did say everything. Robbie was asking, does this help? Does this go towards Vandy United? Does this benefit the campaign? She said everything helps Vandy United. So that's another plus. Will, I mean, that could mean more money into Vandy United, more money into the stadium. Obviously, it's named FirstBank Stadium now. So the logo is already on the new turf field. I don't know if you saw the pictures. Will, turf looks phenomenal, by the way. I didn't even notice how bad the old turf got. Like, I was looking back at how, I mean, it was black. I mean, the pellets that it was covered, so you look back at what it looked like last year and what it looks like now. It's a difference. Now, there's a lot more to do with that stadium than just the turf. But FirstBank Stadium, that's going to take some getting used to. Will, I'm going to miss. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to miss just calling it Vanderbilt Stadium, but it's still Dudley Field. It'll be at FirstBank. It'll be at FirstBank Stadium. So a little bit more of a ring than Vanderbilt Stadium.
Yeah, I was about to say the Vanderbilt Stadium, like, Vanderbilt fans know that's the name of it, but I don't really think most people, if you asked even just casual Vanderbilt fans and said, what was the name of Vanderbilt's actual stadium, they would go, oh, Dudley Field. And you go, no, that's the name of the field.
Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally like, I don't think that's just significant. It's not like it's, Neyland Stadium. There's not Bryant Denny. So I'm a big fan of anything that promotes putting more money into an athletic program, and especially football program that has been woefully underfunded with the amount of money it brings in. I would be curious to see how much this deal is for. We will not know. We will probably never know exactly how much it is for. But I mean, just a billboard sitting in the middle of West End and Nashville for 10 years would be pretty damn expensive to sign a contract for 10 years, much less a stadium naming rights deal. So I would say that this, regardless of the state of the Vanderbilt athletic program, just with the location of where these naming rights are going to be, that it was a pretty hefty amount that FirstBank had to pay.
I'm also interested, Will, to see what were the agreements, what was in that contract, was there anything FirstBank said had to happen? The stadium has to look like this. I think that's an interesting aspect. I heard there's a lot of Vanderbilt alums that work with FirstBank. It's obviously based in Nashville, Tennessee. So I think that's another interesting component. I don't think they would have signed this deal if I mean, they're not just signing this. I mean, I think there's some elements to this that say FirstBank Stadium, they're going to have it somewhat their way. I mean, obviously it's Vanderbilt Stadium, but I'll be interested to see how, maybe that news probably isn't going to come out, their involvement in the stadium, but that'll be interesting. So FirstBank Stadium, that's the name. Will it sounds like an NFL stadium, right? I keep thinking of US Bank Stadium.
Or it's like a combo of First Tennessee Park and with the Suns and that. But yeah, it's outside motivation. Like, I like what you just said. I just wanted to hit a double point on that right now Vanderbilt just has no people holding them accountable on how they are spending their money in their athletic program, because they're the only private university in the SEC. So you don't have any outside eyes. I mean, you have people criticizing them, and clearly they're not putting money that athletic programs are bringing into the university back into the athletic programs. That's obvious. But every other school, you would actually know what they were doing with the money, because it has to be transparent as a public university. So maybe this outside sponsorship, obviously they have put money forth for these naming rights and given it to Vanderbilt. So there's got to be some type of upgrade, maintenance, how it appears, and everything associated with that deal. So it's just another concrete step that Candace Story-Lee has done more in her short time here than every single Vanderbilt AD in the last 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
Literally, it's not even close. It's amazing already. I mean, Vanderbilt athletics has been so stagnant. She has moved them forward more than anyone since when? When was the last major revamp like this? The 80s?
I don't know.
Maybe
Gordon Gee he was a renowned AD, but he didn't even. I mean, it's not like he came in and did any renovations. I mean, no one's ever
crazy.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt men's locker room redone, redoing the stadium, redoing the men's football locker room. I mean, having to go through the situation that she did with the turmoil inside of the football program. I've been as negative as we were right at the beginning, especially me. There have been very few people that have ever just stepped in, and so far, and I'm saying all this with an asterisk, that we haven't seen the final product out, but she has impressed me, and it's going to be pretty crazy looking back in the next 5 to 10 years at what's able to be accomplished.
Yeah, credit to her, Daniel Diermeyer, and the FirstBank. I mean, everybody that was able to make that happen. I mean, this is nothing small. I mean, next 10 years, that's the name of the stadium. So, and to have an investment like that from a corporation like that, a Nashville-based, Clark Lee said this is about the city too. I mean, being in the city of Nashville, and we've talked about this. We could keep talking about this, Will. This could be a 3-hour episode if we wanted it to. But
you also said you wanted the preview of the Hawaii game to be longer. It was like an hour. It was like an hour and a half. Wasn't it?
Well, I mean, we could have kept. We didn't even.
We could have made it 3 hours.
We didn't even get into the depth chart at all. That's the only reason. But no, Will. Honestly, this is more about the city of Nashville and that investment. And we've talked about it. You driving by that, you can't even really tell anymore, especially with, I mean, you see it kind of as you're driving past on West End, but I think the more of the goal is to make that a noticeable thing. So, and see, that's Vanderbilt Stadium. There it is. So,
I mean, it could potentially be one of the coolest looking setups. If redone properly. They have the bones of one of the most unique setup, maybe outside of Stanford. There's this pretty cool looking setup of just being literally in the middle of a metropolitan area. I mean, Nashville's not quite there yet as being one of the top biggest major cities, but it's growing so fast.
Yeah.
And every other school, I just keep hitting on this. If you drive around to every other SEC school, the city that they are in is that school. That is the main draw of that city. That is not the case with Nashville. And with the modern NIL, the tie of college athletics into business with that, Vanderbilt is positioned well in the biggest changeover, whether it's combining with how college athletics are broadcast over the internet, and every single game is on television. So these large stadiums aren't as aren't as big of a draw to kids. And it feels like these recruits are looking for different things now.
Yeah.
And so Vanderbilt's trying to position themselves in this new, unique spot while these other traditional powers try to hold on to what they have in the past. And I have a train coming by, Billy. I don't know if you
Oh
can hear
my!
it through the mic, but
I heard a little
it
bit of
doesn't
it.
come by much. But here we go. So we have to
Monumentous.
get there. We
It's a
go,
special
baby.
moment. The
Week
honorary
1 recap. There we go. We've
the
got it.
honorary moment of silence for Will's train, but but Will, I was gonna say there's not many schools, not even in the SEC, but in the country that you can take a recruit down to downtown Nashville on Broadway and then bring them back over to your campus like 5-10 minutes away, 10 minutes down the road. So there's no one really else that can do that.
I could not imagine if the football program 5, 10, 15 years down the road somehow managed to be a top tier program and be competing to win the SEC East and these or something along those lines one season, because that Vanderbilt baseball program, the Vandy boys, a couple years ago, not this most recent season, but 2 years ago, I was at Jason Aldean's downtown on Broadway. And after that game, they came in to that, and obviously they had been allowed to go in the back door. And man, it was incredible to see just what that team drew attention of the people saying that the Vanderbilt college baseball team was there.
Yeah, imagine the
football. Imagine team. Exactly.
Imagine so that. Imagine Vanderbilt competing for an East title.
That is something that you just like. It's different going out to a bar in Knoxville, like seeing the players out there. It's just so different. The environment, different. And I don't have like the good words for it here, Billy, because it's as I told you before, I logged off work and logged on here, so that's where we're sitting.
Working man in Vanderbilt podcasting. I'll continue to say it every time we record. But Will, nonetheless, let's get to the Hawaii recap. And Will, before we dive into everything, of course, you've got a lot. I've got a lot from what we saw. I'm going to read a quote from Max Worship. And first, of course, we all saw what Jeff Reinbold, Hawaii's director of player development, said before the game. And man, did that age very well, pretty quickly, actually, too, in the second half. Maxwell Worship, after the game, though, said, in quote, "Our head coach literally showed us that video about 10 times throughout the week. Even when we got here during the team dinners, that would be up on the screen. Everything that has happened, everything since we've been here has been moved as motivation. Coach Lee and all the coaches have made sure to really use all those things as motivation for our team. We wanted to set a statement. We wanted the whole world really to see we're a different team this year. We're going to earn everybody's respect this year." And after reading that, I read that, I think the next morning, early Sunday morning, and I was like, oh, man. I mean, that's a statement. And yeah, talk is talk, but I think this year, Will, there is a chip. I mean, and it was pretty obvious coming out of the half, that second half. I mean, you could see in that team, Clark Lee told his offense to run it down their throat. That's what they did. They did that the entire second half. And we'll get into that. We'll start, of course, in the first half. We'll go through everything. But, well, a couple stats here. Vandy finished with over 600 yards of total offense, 2 defensive touchdowns, 6 different players scored a touchdown. I didn't even realize that. 6 different Vanderbilt players had a touchdown. And they actually led the nation with 601 total yards this week 0, against an FBS opponent. So, of course, week 0 is a limited slate there. But I thought that was an interesting little stat leader. Barrett Salia tweeted that out. And then, Will, I've got a bunch of historical feats here that Vanderbilt accomplished.
And Anfernee Orji was the Reese's Senior Bowl
Player
of the Week as well.
Reese's Bowl Player of the Week, and he'll definitely be in the Reese's Bowl. Historical feats, Will. Vandy hadn't scored 63 points in a game since 1969 when they whipped Davidson 63-8. The point differential in this Hawaii game was the largest since 2012, a game against Presbyterian. I remember that one. I was at that one, actually. In that same game, Vanderbilt's 404 rushing yards. That was the most since having 410 against Presbyterian. So going back to Presbyterian, that's a common opponent there. Vanderbilt's 35 points in the third quarter was the most in a quarter since 2013 against Austin Peay. So it's
every team you've named off so far is FCS. Well.
Exactly. Exactly. Mike Wright's 87-yard touchdown was the second longest run in Vanderbilt history. I was surprised by that.
Wow.
I was a little bit. Had you heard that yet?
Mm-mm.
I was a little surprised by that. 87, that's a long way.
Know the longest run in Vanderbilt history? I'm curious. That's a real question. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm guessing they're saying that like offensive play, right? Like that's a run. I'm guessing. So 80 longest, I guess, handoff or carry, I guess, 87-yard touchdown run. So I don't know. That's a good question, Will. I mean, longest, of course, kickoff. You got all Darius Sims is both kickoffs, but in terms of run, I have no idea. It's probably one of the running backs.
We'll get our staff on it.
Yeah.
Get our staff to figure it out. Our producers, our
Yeah,
massive staff.
We'll get the command center on that. We'll get back to you guys. But Will, let's go through it. First half, first quarter. So we'll go through quarter by quarter. We'll see how long this goes. We'll start with the first quarter. Will, honestly, first possession for Hawaii. I was pretty surprised. Hawaii really marched down the field. Their passing looked really good, and they had did exactly what we talked about. The quick passes. Timmy Chang got it out. His quarterback Shager, I thought looked pretty good. I was sitting there saying, this guy's not bad. I mean, he was slinging it. Number 7 was the one player for Hawaii that was kind of a specimen. And maybe it was just everyone else was so much smaller. But I thought number 7 was, I was, like, this guy's a weapon. But so first drive after that, Will, my thought was, this is looking eerily similar to so many games last season. But it pretty quickly changed in the turning point after, the fumble forced by Max Worship, and Anfernee Orji recovers it. But Will, that first quarter, those first couple drives for Hawaii, were you surprised by the fact they were able to move the ball so easily? Because I really wasn't. I mean, Vanderbilt has no clue what they're going to face, and they had to figure that they made the adjustments. But at the same time, I really wasn't that surprised. The one run, they had the 30-yard touchdown off the edge there with Dedrick Parsons. But if you look at it, he didn't even beat Vanderbilt was just out of position. Like it was kind of interesting watching that touchdown. It's like it was kind of in slow motion. I wasn't surprised, but at the same time, Vanderbilt made the adjustments.
I'm not going to lie. Right at the beginning of that game, I was saying some words and acting in a way
sinking feeling.
I'm very glad that there was not a video camera recording me because honestly, it was pretty crazy up until about, I don't know, the 4-minute mark when Vandy got that ball on their third possession of the game and was able to drive down and score a touchdown before forcing that fumble and returning it. But the first 11 minutes of the game were basically dominated by Hawaii. Yeah. And then the entire rest of the game, every single minute for the remainder of the game, was almost completely dominated by Vanderbilt. And the superior athletes took over. And actually, Hawaii was able to move the ball less than I expected. I saw that first drive, and that's about what I thought, is they would come out first quarter or so, would be able to have a little success. And then they would have some success again in the second quarter when they were able to see how Vanderbilt was defending that, make a couple adjustments. But they were never able to make the adjustments, and Clark Lee was able to adjust better / his athletes were so much better. But yeah, that first quarter was almost an oh shit, here we go again.
Yeah, it was.
And Hawaii looked how we thought they would. They didn't look good. It's not like they looked amazing at the beginning of the game. Vanderbilt just came out. I think that they were playing, I don't know if it was too tight. They were almost playing so much with so much aggression and so much trying to be in the right spot that they weren't just playing instinctively at the first. And that's such a stupid, broad term that there's nothing to point to, that's completely intangible.
Instinctively.
But there's this moment at the beginning of every game, no matter what sport it is, that you're not completely settled in. And it's like, it kind of feels weird. You're not quite in the rhythm. And then it took them a little bit longer than I expected to settle into the game against Hawaii. And usually the early unsettled portion of that game favors the inferior opponent. So Hawaii was able to capitalize. Early credit to Timmy Chang. He had a great first drive script. That clearly was what he had planned. That first drive that they were able to work on was fantastic. And this is another one of those, like a lot of the games we said last year, I really, after watching them, was kind of impressed with their scheme.
Yeah.
Hawaii's scheme. Hawaii's roster. Man, I mean, it was tough. So Timmy Chang did some things, but there was some good signs from Vanderbilt. after that first drive, which is this Hawaii offensive line is actually pretty experienced and pretty talented. This was not a bad Hawaii offensive line. You saw
they were getting pushed early
yep,
in that game, and
because they have 5 really good offensive linemen.
Yeah, and
they just don't have the depth, man.
Yeah, meanwhile Vanderbilt is very thin right now, and they're gonna be thin all year at that position. There's just not.
Did you hear the stat throughout the game that Vanderbilt only had 9 sacks last season?
Yes,
and they had 3 this game.
They had 3. That's crazy.
It's like any criticisms that we're coming up with where we're like they're going to be thin on the defensive line. It's always taking back, and I keep wanting to take a step back and say where Vanderbilt started from last season.
Yeah. Well,
it's like you can't even have any criticism of it because you're starting from as low of a point in statistically as you possibly can.
I think you saw Jadis Richard get a sack there late, and they brought pressure from really everywhere. I mean, they brought the linebacker pressure. I don't know if Kane Patterson. I think Kane Patterson he was in there definitely a few times.
I think it was.
Trying to figure out.
Miles Cecil was the one. He had that incredible bull rush.
Yes.
On that one play, and then I think it was B.J. Anderson. Yeah, B.J. Anderson got the other one. He had the one where the quarterback was rolling out to the side, and he was able to chase him down.
Two of the sacks are from secondary players or linebacker, but Cecil, he's a guy I think. He may lead the team in sacks. He may only have 3 or 4. But he's a guy. He's got a motor. I mean, he keeps going all game. By the fourth quarter, there's going to be an O lineman out there, that doesn't want to face him, doesn't want to go up against him. So the defense, they're going to bring pressure. They brought the pressure we thought they were going to bring, and I thought Nick Howell I thought he did a really good job of doing that. And you saw how much energy they had, especially in the second half. But the turning point, I mean, it was Max Worship's forced fumble. And I heard a quote from Max after the game. He said, the ball, he said, the ball attracts you, when you've got energy, you're flying around. And that's what it did in both fumbles. I mean, they were coming in there. Elijah McAllister on the other one, they had hats on the ball, and that's what they're taught. And so the Vanderbilt scored 14 points in that 15-second stretch late in that first quarter. Wright, of course, had the touchdown pass to Shepard, and oh my goodness, I thought he might have thrown it for a second. That was interesting. But Hawaii's next play from scrimmage, Max Worship forced the fumble, and then Anfernee Orji touchdown. So just like that, it felt like, okay, here's the turning point. This is where everything turns. You just felt it. I mean, the energy. I saw you tweet, "Inject this into my veins." The forced fumble. I mean, you look at that was one of the most energetic sidelines I've seen in a while for Vanderbilt football, and you just felt more unity. I mean, you just felt it. And watching a game. I mean, we watched the whole game. And so you just felt a little bit more chemistry, more unity from the team. So yeah, that was a turning point. Will, of course. Second quarter, was it 20? It was 21-10 or 21-7. What was
21-10.
21-10 at the half. Okay, so 21-10 at the half, and at that point, I mean, you really felt like it was Vanderbilt's. I mean, they got that touchdown to end the first half, and that felt like, okay, Vanderbilt, they're obviously better. They have taken control of this game, and they get the ball to begin the second half. It was just like Coach Lee had set it up. He said we wanted to give our offense that extra possession in the second half. And man, I mean, did it not just feel like Clark Lee told his team, let's go run it, just run it up their throats? I mean, that's what it looked like going into that. I don't know if you have anything else in the first half, but yeah, the running game. I mean, the running game late in that first half, you could kind of start to see Hawaii's they're already kind of getting tired in that run game. And late in that first half, Vanderbilt, of course, got on the board again. Okay, I think it was that Mike Wright touchdown. So, Will, the first half, it was the first half. It wasn't, anything really too exciting. It was pretty much business as usual, especially in the second quarter. But you get to begin that third quarter, Will. I mean, it felt almost like a new Vanderbilt team. Like that's where you saw the whole chip. It's like, okay, this team came out with a fire. And I think that was best to see. Will, I was wrong. I'll admit I was wrong about the opening kickoff. I said Clark Lee should return it and send a message. He, I think, did the right thing in return, thinking back, saying second half, this is going to be ours. That's when they want to send a message. So I'll retract that statement.
Yeah, Hawaii had the moment. I mean, I think you felt it going into the locker room, which is Hawaii played in all honesty, as well as they possibly
Just about
could
as good as they could
in that first half, and they were still down 21-10.
It's got to be,
and that's really disheartening and demoralizing to be down 2 scores in the first
it
half.
happened to Vandy a lot last year.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you go in the locker room, you have a moment, and you all sit down and you look around and you think about the fact of the best case scenario is probably 42-20. And this Vanderbilt team came out and it felt like they wanted to make a statement. I don't know what was said in that locker room, but their scheme
They probably
didn't
showed
change.
the video again.
Yeah, their scheme didn't change, but boy, was there an emphasis on the fact of we are better than them. Our athletes are superior. Every single one of you is a better player than they are. And I think that maybe that just needed to be pounded into their heads, because in the second half, it was dominant. It was nasty. It was every single play. They were up 30 and they were getting the sack, and Cecil was standing over and everybody was bouncing over on top of the quarterback. And you need to see that. This team hasn't had any of that.
Yep.
You haven't seen that since the years with Mason, with Joanne Williams and that defense, and Cunningham.
The swagger.
They had some nasty to them. And that's what Vanderbilt's been missing. And there was something, and I guess I can hit on this now because we're about to get into the second half. But at the end of the game, the announcer said something along the lines of the color commentator, I don't remember his name, said
Aaron
something
Taylor.
like, yeah, that I was not a fan of him. But
yeah, he wasn't particularly very good.
He kept naming Vanderbilt players, reading off their names as Hawaii players. He said it about Jalen Mahoney multiple times, calling the Hawaii secondary, but that's not the point of what I was getting.
He knows football, but
yes,
it wasn't
he
really.
Didn't prep. He did.
Yeah, you could tell. He knew football, but
he was very knowledgeable. He was very knowledgeable of the X's and O's of football, especially the offensive line. But he had clearly spent 30 minutes max reading over, and it just pisses me off.
He was at Waikiki Beach most of the time.
It pisses me off because, man, we do this for basically free. And if you gave me something that was my job to prep, I would know every detail about every player on both sides. And it bothers me to see the lack of effort. But that's not the point of what I was getting to, Billy. Is he said something at the end of the game about this Vanderbilt team needing to not get overconfident. He was looking at the sideline and not get ahead of themselves and looking ahead. And it made me sit there and think that was probably the dumbest statement that I've ever heard an announcer say. It was Vanderbilt's team not to get overconfident. So he wanted Clark Lee to go into the locker room of a team that opened last season by losing for the first time in program history to an FCS team. And Clark Lee, who went to school and is an alum from Vanderbilt and played football there, opened his head coaching tenure by losing to an FCS program. After going 2-10, and the previous season, Vanderbilt went 0-9. And he wants Clark Lee to walk in the locker room and say, guys, great game. Let's not get cocky. All right. I know you guys are probably looking ahead past our FCS opponent next weekend, even though we lost for the first time in program history last year to an FCS opponent. But we've got to stay focused. This team is not going to struggle to stay focused on Elon after beating Hawaii. I would bet a lot that will not be an issue for Clark Lee and staff getting these players to stay focused on an FCS opponent after beating Hawaii 63-10.
Yeah.
I think if anything, he's going to have to tell them to not come out and just play over the top aggressive and tight, because I know that like this was a statement game, beating the crap out of their FCS opponent is going to want to be a statement. So I wanted to get that in before that statement from the color commentator literally made me just sit and stare at my TV with my jaw open. I was like, you really think that that's an issue with this Vanderbilt team is overconfidence? I was like, let them enjoy this, man. They deserve to celebrate like they just won the SEC championship, because this team has been through as much adversity over the last year of reading every single person talking about them, that they don't belong in the SEC and they suck and they're awful and they're embarrassed. And that's all they saw. Let them enjoy it, man.
Yeah.
And that was just so it's like, dude, you have no idea about this program. Like that's brutal to hear.
There were several moments from Aaron Taylor throughout the night like that. I mean, and he went to Notre Dame. I'm sure he's close with Clark Lee. And, let's just say we expected better of Aaron Taylor.
I loved his offense. Now, with that, Nate, I loved his offensive line breakdown of protection
Yes.
schemes and
Yeah.
what they were looking at. That's what I mean is when he was just talking X's and O's, great content.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say. So it's not all hate on him. But.
Yeah. Oh man, but Will, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't remember hearing that, but I was that was after the game. You said like right after. Okay. Well,
It was like
I need to go back and
game when they were all celebrating after another stop, and he was like, they just need to make sure to not get overconfident and look ahead to that Wake Forest game and skip past Elon because they could slip up. And I was like, dude, come on.
Yeah, to that, I'll say this: there's three letters actually. FCS opponent. Vanderbilt, Clark Lee is going to hammer that. There's so much motivation. There's so much bulletin board material this year for Coach Lee. I mean, for Hawaii game, you've got that video. That one was handed to you. That was a gift wrapped Christmas present for you. Elon, FCS opponent. Just show them the whole game. Sit them down and show them the ETSU game last year. There's that one. And then what is it for Northern Illinois? I mean, I don't know. You could just make things up. I mean, Tennessee, show them. There's so much out there this year for Coach Lee to use to motivate this team, and I'm sure he's happy about that. And he's that kind of guy. He's not going to miss a beat with that stuff. But I was a little surprised him showing the video. That's a side of Clark Lee. I think we're still learning about him, and he's got a little bit of savage. He's got some savage in him, and he's not afraid to step out there and do.
Dude, you don't play fullback in the SEC without having a little nasty.
Yeah,
and he's about as professional. Nasty. Yeah, he's about as professional as can be in every interview. Yeah, he seems like a very nice guy. Everything as a person. Now, I'm sure as a football coach, there's some moments that he's not the kindest out there, but dude, there's definitely a side to Clark Lee that I don't think gets exposed to the public and the fan base and the media. And I don't know if nasty is the right word, but just that factor. I'm starting to gritty. Yeah. That's one of our favorite words.
I mean, if he was a Madden player, he created him, his adjective would be grit. I mean, he's a gritty coach. So Will, that we talked about the first half, the turning point, of course, the fumble, Max Worship forced it. So all the bad things were in the first half. Will, I mean, some first half mental mistakes, the 4th and 5 throwaway from Mike Wright. We saw that. Some puzzling.
Now looking back, I got very mad at that.
Yes,
and just wanted him to toss it down the field. But looking at that play and watching the replay with a calmer head, I think he was throwing it away. He really had nowhere to go, and he basically saved 15 yards of field position.
Yes.
Because I think if he would have launched it, it probably would have been intentional grounding. He may have been able to get away, but there was also a chance on 4th down he was going to get sacked and compound the problem of now putting them another 15 yards down the field on a Hawaii offense that has struggled to move the ball outside of one possession. So not as dumb of a decision as it initially appeared. And even Barstool tweeted that Mike Wright had thrown the ball away. And thank God the first comment underneath, because I almost put it, was really stupid play by the quarterback to save his defense 15 yards of field position or something like that right underneath. It was not a Vandy fan. It had like 400 likes, and I was like, thank you.
I saw a comment. Somebody said, show the touchdown he threw like next but there will. I'll admit this, and I mean, it's we're looking back here. It's hard to look at the bad. There wasn't much bad at all. I mean, Vanderbilt played a clean overall football game. They didn't make they didn't make any mistakes really. But I will say there was a little bit of puzzling play calling at times. The one moment I know you want to hammer this home also, but right before the half, of course, it didn't matter. None of this, the mistakes didn't. Now in the locker room, they matter. Coach Lee's going to watch these and correct them, but Vanderbilt didn't use any 3 of their timeouts in the first half. I'm not saying they absolutely needed to, but I think they could have gotten to at least a field goal, make it 24-10, or maybe they could have made it 28-10 if they keep marching down, but they really wasted, you could say 30 to 40 seconds of the last first half. And, looking back at, obviously, you look back and say it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. They were getting the ball anyway to start the second half. I think that's more of what they were thinking. But still, I look at, and this isn't anything against Joey Lynch. It was just, I thought in the moment, there were a lot of things in the moment you look at and you say, why didn't they call a timeout there? Why did, they could have set themselves up for a field goal. In the end, though, you can't really harp too much on the bad in this game because there really wasn't much of it. So I don't know what you thought going back at that, Will, that string, the last minute of the first half. Like I said, looking back, it doesn't mean really much at all. But that's kind of scratching the surface if you really want to find something somewhat bad in the first half.
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing I would point out.
It was just confusing.
I mean, I think that they had a couple things they were trying to do and were kind of indecisive. And I don't think that what they chose to do was wrong, which I think initially they were trying to drive down the field. They got in fourth down and they were going to run. They were going to run down, but they were running down the clock to try to just throw that fade route to get into field position for a field goal in the half, go up 14, then get the ball back immediately. That's what they were kind of trying to do, because likely you weren't going to be able to move the ball 50 yards in 30 or 40 seconds. You're probably going to end up with a field goal regardless. And also part of it is just not wanting to do anything against and in a situation that Vanderbilt's not commonly in, but do anything to give the Hawaii team momentum going into the half when you're clearly way better than them. Right. So of all the criticisms there wasn't anything in this game that was too head scratching. There were of course little things, but there were certainly, and I know that obviously is easier to say after a 63-10 win. There were things we both disagreed with, and we're trying to get to those, that not everything is roses and daisies, but it's really hard to be that critical especially after the second half, which the string, I know we want to get to that second half and some of those plays, Billy. I don't want to jump ahead.
No, well, I'm with you. A lot of the second half really outweighed anything bad that might have happened in the first half. I mean,
that was as close to a perfect half of football as you're going to see.
I haven't ever seen in my lifetime, I haven't seen a half of football like that ever. Now, this is the opponent you would guess it would happen against, but still, I mean, it happened, and it happened against an opponent, an FBS opponent. I'll get to this. I want to say something about Hawaii, but I'll save that for the end. So Will, second half, getting to, I mean, most of these stats, Mike Wright, I mean, 163 yards. Most of those came from that 87-yard touchdown run. The block, my goodness, Will Shepherd made. And Gavin Schoenwald had a nice block out there in the edge, too.
I was about to say, he looked like Michael Orr from The Blind Side on the outside. It got overshadowed by the crackback. Well, not crackback, because that's a penalty. The great block by Will Shepherd that happened. We'll rephrase. Where that used to be an awesome.
Wait, that's a penalty.
Yeah, that's a penalty now. That used to be a good thing, but the block by him got overshadowed. The Gavin Schoenwald absolutely.
Yeah, honestly, the block was maybe more impressive than the run.
Yeah. And it was Will Shepherd. Not only did he have that big block, he'd also sealed out the either corner or safety and blocked him as well. So he took two guys out of the play. Yeah. And the main best part of the block wasn't even the big portion of it. It was sealing off either the corner or the safety before. The blocking from that offensive line in the second half was dominant. I mean, they dominated them. It is what you would expect. It looked like an SEC O-line against Hawaii. I mean, you could have looked at what they were doing and replaced the jerseys, and it looked like any other SEC team would have.
Yeah, Ray Davis.
That is the difference. That would not have looked that way last year.
No, on Ray Davis's run, Will, literally every Vanderbilt lineman, they pancaked their opponent, their defender. I mean,
it was 6 or 7 yards before the ball carrier was being touched on most of those runs. I mean, until the linebacker was like getting a hand on him 6-7 down the field. I mean, the offensive line was just
shout out to the Grease gang, Coach Blazek. He's really done a good job. Even last year, I mean, you saw improvement with that patchwork offensive line. So, but Will, that play with the Shepherd block and Mike Wright's run, after watching that, I thought SEC. Like you see a block like that, you see Schoenwald, and then you see a guy running 20 miles per hour down the sideline. Like that's SEC. You know, that was kind of, that felt like, okay, Vanderbilt, that's some aggressiveness. You know, that's the SEC speed and fire and aggression that you expect to see when you're playing a bad FBS team. I mean, that's what I noticed. That's what I thought of. I thought
the size of the team. They were bigger. Everyone on the team was just bigger, and it was guys getting hit, and every single one of them, even when they were getting tackled, was the Hawaii player was bouncing off of them even when they were going down. And it was Ramon Davis going out of bounds. They would have, the Hawaii player was throwing their full body and they were shrugging them off.
It's not,
and I think it was the I don't remember if it was the Elijah McAllister run back or the Orji. I think it was Elijah McAllister, but the quarterback was trying to chase him down, and he just shrugged him off like he was a gnat. I mean, he just kind of stuck an arm out and just threw him off of him. Yeah. And there were multiple plays like that with stiff arms, and it just, I think it was, I don't remember if it was an announcer that said it, but some of the parents were saying just the expectations of the workouts was what the players were telling them. Just what the expectations were of what every single day coming in and the amount of work you were putting in.
Yeah.
And I don't want to overreact because we will see as the level of the opponent increases
A little bit.
But the team sure looked a lot stronger and bigger than they did
Every
last
player,
year.
you could tell, even a guy like Max Worship, he looks bigger. Everybody looks bigger. And you could tell that Coach Horgan, I mean, what a hire he was coming over from Wake Forest. But Will, on the Hawaii players, it's not like they weren't trying. Like they were going 100%. And the way they were like dodging at Vanderbilt on offense and like the effort, like their attempts at tackling was almost laughable. Like, I'm not going to sit here and feel bad for them, but in the moment, it's like this team, this is JV and varsity. Like it's just, that's what but a Vanderbilt person watching that, it's like, you look at it and you don't think that way. It's like, as a fan, you deserve this. Vanderbilt
I think it was Jacob Scholl, our writer, and his Scholl six-pack, the first edition of that. By the way, it was unbelievably correct. Go back and read that article, and I think 5 or all 6 of them ended up happening as his things to watch. Mike Wright over 100 was one of them, forcing turnovers and winning the turnover battle, and it was pretty great. So we'll keep an eye out for that next week going into the Elon game. But he said something about, I almost feel bad or something, and I said, not a shred. 0.001% feels bad. I wish we would have beat them 163-0 and danced in their end zone at the end, because not one person felt bad for Vanderbilt the last 2 years. Not one person was like, no, they're going through a lot of roster turnover right now with a new head coach.
They were laughing on their graves.
Yeah. They were dancing on their graves and pointing and laughing at them.
Hawaii.
So I'm going to do that. I'm going to celebrate, and I'm not going to feel bad about an opponent with a roster that is very thin, with a lot of movement, and is undermanned and is up against it, because nobody felt sorry for Vanderbilt fans. Nobody felt sorry for that team. If anything, it was 1,000 times worse than what Hawaii is going to deal with the amount of eyes, because I know those Vanderbilt players read all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it has been relentless since the ETSU game. And actually the reaction nationally has been a lot more like, wow, than I expected. I don't think most people realize how bad Hawaii is, but it's still, I think most people are looking at that and saying, okay, this is different. Now, does it translate to a big difference in the win-loss column this season?
Probably not.
I don't know. Probably not. But that is just, seeing that score is something that the last couple of years Vanderbilt has been incapable of doing the last 3 years. That has not been a capability against any opponent that is FBS or FCS. So this is a massive improvement in that run from Mike Wright, dude. I mean, it looked like he was in fast forward. There were multiple guys that had angles on him.
I was just like watching them. I was like wide-eyed, and my mouth was just.
Did you read off the sequence in that second half? Just to this is the Vanderbilt offensive possessions: touchdown, touchdown. Then they returned the fumble for the touchdown, and then Vanderbilt touchdown. Then another Vanderbilt touchdown.
They only had one punt the whole game.
Then Vanderbilt turned the ball over on downs. Vanderbilt turned the ball over on downs again. And then Vanderbilt scored another touchdown. That was Vanderbilt's sequence of offensive possessions. I mean, my goodness, that was about as perfectly executed of a half, and we can just keep saying it. But man, they actually executed well against an inferior opponent. And in the second half, you saw that they were well prepared and different. It's very easy to not come out focused, especially after that first possession from Hawaii. Man, you could see it for a second that the thought crossed a couple guys' minds of, oh shit.
Yeah.
And man, just that second half, I just keep living in this moment of like, did that really happen? Did we just really see a team actually come out and exceed our expectations, Billy? Because we talked about this. This is the first positive podcast we've ever had since we have done the start of this podcast. We had 0 wins. Yeah. We had 0 wins the first year we did this podcast. And then Vanderbilt had 2 wins, both squeaking by very bad FBS opponents. That's it. Everything else was losses last season. So this is the first time that we're going in and we were like, dude, I can't wait to talk about this game. Like, this is so good. This is going to be a fun recap. We haven't had that yet. This is the first time ever.
Yeah, the A&M recap, I remember that. I think that was our first one, and we were pretty positive, but they lost. Like they lost the game.
It was still a loss. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was more bad than good. But this one, it's literally all good. There was no mistakes in this game. Like literally, I can't think of anything bad that Vanderbilt did in this game. Maybe in the first half, but seeing the second half, it's like you can't even talk about anything that happened in the first half.
Yeah, and I'm just saving, just so everybody knows, I'm saving all of the criticisms and things that I noticed that to watch the rest of the season as like negatives. There are a few. There's not a lot. The defensive line, we can get to all that. But I want to get to that in the preview for Elon. I don't want to sully this positivity we have going on right here.
Yeah.
By going through the two or three things that we noticed that were negative moving forward.
Yeah, I did notice though, Will. I don't know if you watched Coach Lee's press conference after, but he did talk about how, he was asked about what does this mean for your team? Is this a statement made? And he said, I can't say that it is. And a lot of that is coach speak, of course. But, I thought it was interesting how he went immediately to this is what we expect. This is what we want to come to expect. And, I honestly think this Hawaii game, it says more to me. Like winning 63-10 says more to me than if they were to win, 38-17, 42-7. So like putting up 63 points against anyone is impressive. So the fact that they did that puts a little bit of a different tone on the season for me. And I said that. I remember saying that in the preview. I said, if Vanderbilt comes out and demolishes, just wipes out Hawaii, that's going to change it for me. Now I think for me, because of what I saw, I'm picking them to go out and beat Elon convincingly. I'm picking them to go out to Northern Illinois and win that game. Maybe not convincingly, but this changes it for me too for Wake Forest. And I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but it just changes the tone for me a lot, especially hearing what guys say and Coach Lee. Now, if if they were to win 23-10, 23-14, something like that, it would probably be positive because it's a win to start the season, but not like this. I mean, just putting up that it's like, I'm trying to compare it to something. It's like Alabama, it's Alabama, but it's like having that chip and going out there and actually doing it, and actually proving it. And that, we talked about Vanderbilt. Oh, if they demolish them, but they actually went out there and did it. So for me, that puts a little bit of a different tone as opposed to what I expected. Because I will say, I was surprised by the fact that they put up 63 points. I mean, I figured they were going to come out and end up convincingly beating them, but putting up 63, I was like, wow.
Let's not rewrite history here. I think a lot of people are rewriting what was being said about this game going into it. And that it's not necessarily us. I think we were some of the few people that were saying that this Vanderbilt team should come out and beat Hawaii handily.
Yeah.
And my expectation was that this Vegas line was way off. The Vegas line was
what was the last?
It started at 6.5 points.
What was the last Vegas, one before kickoff?
9.5, I think, is where it ended up. So this game started as less than a touchdown difference in the Vegas line and only ballooned out to 9.5 or 10 points. And Vanderbilt beat them 63-10. So I don't want to rewrite this narrative that everyone knew that Vanderbilt was going to go. Not everyone knew that Vanderbilt was going to go in and beat them that badly. That Hawaii was awful. So the expectation was that it was going to be a blowout. No, Vegas, that literally puts their money where their mouth is, expected this to be a relatively tight game.
Yeah.
And money moved and came in on Vanderbilt, but didn't balloon the line out to even 17. It ballooned it out to 9.5, 10 points max, depending on where you're looking. So Vanderbilt came out and blew the expectations out of the water. And every single prediction that we saw, no one predicted more than a 3-score game max is what you could have possibly seen. I saw in any prediction, and I don't even know if I saw a 3-score prediction. I think mine may have been the only one of that. So this Hawaii team was bad, and we knew that going in. But let's not pretend like everyone wasn't also saying this Vanderbilt team is also bad, so this is going to be a very close game. Vanderbilt came out and proved that Hawaii is bad, and Vanderbilt is going to beat the shit out of bad opponents this year. And we haven't been able to say that.
Yeah. Will, look at North Carolina and Florida A&M, Florida FAMU. They almost didn't play that game. They were down like 20 players. North Carolina won like 35-17. Looking around the country, it's like, yeah, Hawaii's bad, but there were other matchups you look at. No one did what Vanderbilt did in week 0. No one. I mean, they were the most impressive team. I saw where Bleacher Report named them the most best team of week 0. And it's not like there were no games. There was a decent amount of games in week 0. And so, yeah, well, but did you see the Western Kentucky Hawaii line? It's I think Western's a 14-point favorite.
Yeah, I think they were 13.5.
Yeah, so that's the mess. That's how different, that's how Vegas already sees it now. Not just how bad Hawaii.
They were actually 13.5 before the game. They were already 13.5-point favorites. Really? So that's how Vegas viewed Vanderbilt. So and that's another thing I'm saying is Vegas viewed Vanderbilt, who just barely beat Austin Peay and was pushed to the edge by Austin Peay, an FCS opponent in week 1. Western Kentucky was. And they had them favored by 13.5 points. Vanderbilt favored by 9.5. I saw that line. So
I laughed out loud. I saw your tweet. Why am I watching Austin Peay, Western Kentucky? Honestly, that sucked. Waiting for Vandy that whole day.
Dude, the Nebraska Northwestern game was entertaining early. Yeah. But other than that,
but after that, it was like that felt
that was a tough. That was
Wyoming and Illinois.
Dude, that was the hand job of college football. The week 0 was. I mean, that was Nebraska Northwestern and Vanderbilt Hawaii to close out the night, and everything in between was like, hey, this would normally just be like ESPN Plus. None of these games would even be on a network. Well, if this was a normal week.
The only downside of Vanderbilt winning 63-10 and dominating in the second half is that most people missed it. Like most people, I think most people saw probably Vanderbilt getting up 35-10 and then called it a night. Like
I think that
not Vandy fans, but I think
not Vandy fans. I think that having that game late, I was kind of shocked at the amount of national attention.
Yeah,
I think that was the point that they had in their heads was we're going to play our week 1 and put a lot of national attention because
it was great for Vandy.
It was fantastic, which is why I was so stressed early. Was the amount of eyes and just on social media from the large accounts that had nothing else to tweet about. That's what there was nothing else going on producing content at that point. So every major account only had that game. And boy, did Vanderbilt actually give them content to put out that looks good for Vanderbilt. Well, that is a unique concept.
The good thing for Vandy is that all those accounts were ready to just roast Vandy for losing to Hawaii eventually, but they didn't do that. So I think they had to change their tune a little bit. Bleacher Report and Barstool and everybody pretty early. So, but yeah, man.
Well, early, dude, they were like waiting to have the SEC.
Oh, the first that was a reach.
They were itching.
The throw, Mike Wright's throw out of bounds on 4th, that's a reach. I mean,
they were reaching early. They were like Hawaii. I think it was Coach Brown from Last Chance U.
Oh my dude,
he said something like he just took it to the house.
He posted like 4 or 5 videos. Did you
see Hayward going back and forth with him?
Yeah.
And that was pretty funny. But he said something like, "And I can't get a job."
Yeah, this is why you can't get a job.
No, he was like Brown was saying, "And I can't get a job. Look at this coaching." I was like,
"No, I know. I'm saying this is why
you may be a great coach, man. I watched you on Last Chance U. You're like he is one of the legitimately most unlikable people that I've ever seen. Like
he's from Compton." And
so like that's where my old roommate and all his family's from that area in California, and they're certainly not like that. I mean, he is just very unlikable. Yeah, just because he's from Compton doesn't mean
I know.
A jackass all the time and be an idiot.
But those videos, it was going back. It was so funny. There were a lot of people that overreacted to Hawaii's first touchdown or some, Mike Wright's throwaway, and then there was a lot of tweets about Vanderbilt scored 63 unanswered after this, or however many, or 35, however many.
I think it was almost better that all these accounts early were jumping on the fact that Vanderbilt was down. And so then you had all these Vanderbilt fans and former Vanderbilt players with the ability to go back after Vanderbilt ended up absolutely obliterating them and making fun of them. And Billy, I think we got a shout out. On what was it, 104.5? I heard from somebody that we got a shout out.
I know. I think it was Buck Rising gave us a little shout out for the Jeff Reinbold old takes exposed. But man, that was easy. That was too easy to do that. But yeah, Will, a lot obviously to get to. The second half was the story. I mean, domination. Let's admit it. I mean, we expected, like, we both came out and said the second half is when Vanderbilt was going to take this game over. I didn't know what the margin was going to be. I certainly didn't think it was going to be 53. But I was a little surprised second half Hawaii just gave up on offense. I mean, yeah, Vanderbilt's defense was they played really well. But I agree with you early on. You said it earlier, Will. I expected to see a little bit more of the first half from their offense than I saw in the second half. But at the same time, it's like they just
saw that it's just with that much roster turnover and new coordinators, new coach, new system. It's what you saw at Vandy last year. It's that Hawaii came out early and they had their script that they had worked on that came out fantastic, but once they were just calling plays within the flow and rhythm of the game, they just didn't have the number of reps together. Things were just a split second off. And it was amazing. And just because of the hate that Vanderbilt got, like we said, I didn't feel bad for them at all. No. But it was like watching them. It was not player effort. It was not scheme. It was not anything they designed. It was just the Hawaii roster did not have enough time together, and they did not have enough talent, athleticism. But mostly on that offense, they just didn't have enough time together executing the plays. They didn't have enough plays that they were confident in. And once Vanderbilt figured out their schemes and plays that they were confident in executing, it was over because you already had the superior talent advantage. So once you take the surprise factor out of what you're doing, man for man, Vanderbilt was just so superior athletically. And that is what the announcers kept saying. And by the end of the game, I think beaten into our minds was the expectation that Vanderbilt's athletes were going to be so much better. But no, it wasn't. No expectations going into this game were that Vanderbilt was going to be physically completely dominant.
It was like they should. But
they should be. 6.5 points was what this line opened up as in Vegas. And right before kickoff, it was 9.5 points. Vanderbilt won by 53. So Hawaii's bad, but Vanderbilt exceeded expectations of beating the bad team. And that second half was about as well executed as you're possibly going to see, Billy. And man, it's hard to not keep repeating how positive we are moving forward, even though there are certainly things that I think we'll get to in the preview of Elon that were not red flags, but maybe orange flags. I'll say that we saw in the Hawaii game.
Yeah, there were some warning signs, definitely. We'll get to those in the Elon preview. Well, I'll say this. I tweeted it after the game. I said, I don't care what anyone says about Hawaii. We get it. They're bad. They're but they are an FBS opponent. And what Vanderbilt did was a massive statement. And, it just was. I mean, you can't put it any other way. So, Will, and you look at offensively, Vandy averaged 16 points per game last year and 313 yards per game. I mean, that's bottom of the entire country. So everything that happened in the Y game, that's a positive sign for this season. And, they were picked, of course, in the East, last in the East. I don't know that happens this year. I think there's a team, Vandy, in the East. I think they can pick off one of those teams. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think Missouri, South Carolina. So those are the two teams. Ole Miss is a trendy upset pick for Vandy because their defense, there's some bad defense in the SEC. We forget, like, Tennessee's defense, Vanderbilt probably can't score with them, but Mike Wright is a weapon, and there's not too many defensive coordinators in the SEC that are too excited to play him and playing against him because obviously he's not a danger. He's not a threat throwing the football. But what he can do running the ball and those running backs and a guy like Jaden McGowan, there's some exciting components to that offense that I don't think the country realizes. I think there's some realization within Nashville and Vanderbilt and that the roster and the team, of course, in that locker room. But I think they put a little bit of they put kind of a warning sign, a red alert on the country saying, hey, Vanderbilt is offensively, they have improved. They have improved.
And this was done without Patrick Smith.
Exactly. Yeah. I kept looking forward to seeing him. And, we saw Chase Gillespie out there run really hard. We saw, of course, Rocco run hard. Ray Davis, did his thing. It's not like one of them had to have, like, they all did their part, and a little bit. The box score, though, Will, it's interesting to look at the box score. Taking a look at this, obviously, Mike Wright's stats, 13 of 21, 146 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, 163 yards rushing. There's not many quarterbacks that'll do that. Ray Davis had 87 yards. Rocco Griffin actually had 12.5 yards per carry. So he was
impressive.
He was really running the ball.
All the running backs were impressive.
Oh yeah. Will Shepherd. There wasn't a receiver that had over 40 yards, but they all had above. There were 6 guys that had above 20 yards. Bresnahan, McGowan, Schoenwald had a catch there. Of course, that was a good progression read for Mike Wright. Quincy Skinner had 3 catches. He looked good. Will Devin Body had that long catch, 38 yards. Shepherd, of course. And then on defense, Will, let's talk about the defense a little bit. If we haven't gotten deep into the defense, Max Worship, obviously, he's probably him and Orji, the 2 guys that looked the most impressive. But you saw Langston Patterson get in there late in the game. You saw Jeffrey Hugo, BJ Diakite, Darren Agu. You saw some young kids that, we expected to see play out there. I mean, we said that before the game. We were like, these guys are going to play, and Agu I saw him in practice, but he kind of reconfirmed, like, down the road, man. I mean, he's got the size now, but imagine him and with Coach Horgan in the weight room these next 2 years. There's some guys on defense, Will, that we need to keep an eye on, definitely. So anybody on defense, you saw a young guy. I know you were most excited to watch Ray Davis. I was most excited to watch Kane Patterson. Kane looked good. He got pressure in there. But defensively, before we close this out, what stood out to you kind of overall, especially with a lot of those young guys, what they were able to get in there and do?
Just overall, just swarming to the ball. It's what we saw last season, but the talent and fit and everything and playing together was just better. But I think I tweeted out a screenshot of the scoop and score. I don't remember which one I tweeted out, but one of the scoop and scores, and there were 6 white jerseys around the ball. And I don't remember if it was the color commentator again, but said something like the football gods are smiling down on Vanderbilt. And that's what made me look at it is, yes, they are smiling down, but the football gods tend to smile down on the team that swarms to the ball.
Yep.
And
that's what
that was more than any specific player, which Worship bounced back from being out of position on that touchdown run from Hawaii. He filled the wrong gap, but then he bounced back and made some great plays the rest of the game as a captain there, including a great pass breakup. The receiver had the ball in the end zone in his hands, and he stuck his hand in there and knocked the ball out. So I wanted to say that. But just that overall swarming. This team was 3rd in the SEC, I believe, in turnovers last year, and turnovers created.
Yeah.
And they did it again. That is something that's not a fluke. That's not because of why this team creates turnovers. And they did that last year, even on what wasn't a good overall team and what wasn't a good defense. They still created turnovers. And that was the positive sign. And they did it again this year with an improved overall defense. So if they can continue to create turnovers at that same rate they did last year and the same rate they did against Hawaii, man, this could be a defense that could surprise some people in what they're able to do if that defensive line can stay healthy. Because I think they're thin there, and you saw some moments when Hawaii was able to move them off the line of scrimmage. And that's why I wanted to say that Hawaii's offensive line is by far the best part of their team. That Hawaii offensive line is a mid to upper mid level Mountain West conference. Yeah, that was a good FBS mid level offensive line even for the Mountain West. That was what is going to be at least middle of the pack or above in the Mountain West. Now, every other position group for Hawaii, that is not going to be true of. They will be bottom of the barrel, but that offensive line for them has the size and experience to be really good. And that's why on that first drive, you kind of saw, I think, what was a little bit of a surprise Vanderbilt defense at how easily they were able to move Vanderbilt off the ball. Now, they adjusted to that, started filling gaps better. But that was the major thing, is after that first drive, the adjustments they made, it was like, okay, enough of that. And it wasn't that Hawaii didn't put together any other majorly long drives. They really didn't put together anything else. I mean, the defense was able to completely shut them down and force multiple turnovers on down, including the one that pretty much ended any chance of this being remotely close, which was that 4th and 1 stop, which was what I tweeted out that said, inject this into my veins, which was Elijah McAllister walking over the sideline with his hand held up.
You saw every coach. Every
you
coach
could hear some of it picked up in that quieter Hawaii Stadium at that point, some of the things that were being said on that sideline.
It was quieter.
There
was only 9,000 people there, but it didn't feel like what Wright.
It felt like some good energy early. But it's gonna be really hard to keep that energy going. I mean, we know that we've been in the stadium, but it's hard to keep the engaged energy when you're down 5 scores in the third quarter. That's pretty hard to keep that loud, raucous environment going.
Yeah,
I was 9,000 person stadium.
It was kind of interesting towards the end of the game. They would pan the crowd and show people that were still there. And I remember looking at my brother and saying, like, why is anyone still there who's wearing green? Like, it's like Vanderbilt has not been in this position. Like I can't remember when. I don't know that it's ever happened in my lifetime. Like against obviously the Presbyterian game. There's games here and there, but
FBS, man. I'm not sure in FBS. That's what I keep hitting at. There's been FCS opponents that have felt this way, but we'd have to look back. I'm not sure when the last time they had an FBS opponent that felt that dominant. There was UMass game, maybe.
Yeah, there was one year they beat Wake Forest pretty bad on the road with Zach Stacy when he was there. I remember his long run, but not like this. Nothing like this. I mean, 63-10. It really shows the difference between the first game last year and this first game of the season this year. Will, obviously, I look at what you just talked about after Vanderbilt gave up the touchdown to Hawaii. The feeling wasn't, oh shit, here we go again. It was settle down. Let's chill out. Something's going to happen for us that's going to click our energy. And what do you know? It did. It was the Orji fumble recovery. And of course, they had the touchdown right before that. So 20-second swing, just like that, Vanderbilt has full control of the game. I mean, you felt it. So, and that's boy, did they need that? That was huge. That was huge for the first half, but also for the whole game. They needed something like that to happen, and it happened. So Will, I mean, we could keep going. This is the longest. Man. This is fun. I wonder how many
rambling positively instead of rambling negatively. It's pretty fun.
I mean, last year it was always, right, what else did they do? What else happened? Like, it was very repetitive. So, but that's the difference, Will. I think this season with this team, it's going to be less of that. We would hope so. But I think even more so than we expect. Like
you saw. Well, I do want to get to this, Billy. Sorry, while I remember it, you saw your boy Swan got to get out there. What did you think of him?
He's a freshman. He's a freshman. Going out there. I think the first throw, obviously, going out there as a freshman, it's tough. But he did the throw to was it McGowan, or I think it was Body. It was Devin Body. He made a beautiful throw. And you kind of see him. You just see the makings. You see the ingredients. It's like you don't have all the ingredients yet, but you've got most of what you need, and you're going to be developed. We knew, I think the fact that he was named the backup pretty close to the Hawaii game, I think that was another little statement of Clark kind of putting in the back of the minds of Vanderbilt people saying, this guy's probably going to play because we're confident we're going to demolish Hawaii. So I think that was kind of, maybe a trend there, but yeah, I mean, freshman, I don't know how much he's going to be able to play. I don't know that he plays against Elon. If this happens again, he's going to get in there and play. But it was big, Will, for a lot of those young guys to get in there and play. I mean, Swan, Langston Patterson. I mean, I saw guys I didn't even really recognize. I had to look at and say, what freshman is that?
They said they brought they brought the entire roster.
Brought the whole roster
on the Hawaii trip. So that was something else that I didn't realize is they brought everyone with them.
Oh, Will,
on the trip.
We didn't talk about it. Matt Hayball's punt.
Yep.
So the thing about that, obviously, it went into the end zone, but my goodness, how long?
I think it was 65.
Oh my! I mean, they were around the 30-yard line, I think, maybe even inside the 30, and he just
65 yards,
65-yard punt. I mean, I don't think they had one of those last year.
Oh well, a negative here, Billy. They did put the ball on the ground a couple times, and it did bounce back to them. But on the punt return McGowan, but Will Shepherd fumbled the punt. And somebody that we were talking about was probably back there because of how sure-handed he was, and he muffed the punt and was able to get it back. Thank God.
Yeah, we talked about that, Will. I was more worried about Ray Davis back there. That wasn't a factor. But Shepard, you brought up Shepard, and I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they throw him back out there as a punter. It's just punter. That's the most injury-prone position in football. And say you drop one, that's maybe a little bit of a confidence. Lower your confidence. I don't know, but yeah, that happened, and that obviously he recovered it, but SEC team, who knows, that could be pounced on. So that's something to watch too. There's adjustments that obviously need to be made leading into Elon, but I'm sure Clark will be all over those. But I kind of want to just like sit in silence and just enjoy this feeling. Like
just soak it in for a second.
I was not going to sleep. I was not going to sleep at all for that one. I mean, went to sleep at like 2 a.m. But man, I mean, that was something I didn't expect. I don't know that you expected a 63-10 game. I don't think anybody did. And that's why I think nationally, that's why it got the pub that it did. I think that's a big reason behind it. So that's it, Will. Anything else we have to leave here? Just, should we save the last 10 seconds for just a moment of silence for this feeling?
Just the countdown here for us actually being able to sit and end this recap of a game and me not feel angry as I walk out of I just fired up and in a bad mood because now I've just talked about all the things that have infuriated me.
I remember
it's actually the positives here. So it's amazing.
I can't count the number of rants you went on last year, and I would just sit there and just like, it's better doing this, obviously, sitting here and listening to us rant about how good it was than anything that happened last year. So
I don't know. It might be more entertaining to hear us rant about the bad things. I'm not sure.
Oh, man. So that does it, Will. Vanderbilt returns home next Saturday night against Elon, 6:00 kickoff at FirstBank Stadium. That's going to take some getting.
It's going to be weird.
Here. Will, you going?
Oh, yeah. I'll be there.
Oh yeah, I'll be there too. So we'll see how early. I definitely want to get back, watch Notre Dame, Ohio State. Hopefully Vandy jumps out early against Elon. But you've been listening. Dude, I'm out of sorts now.
Yeah,
so that does it for episode 174 of the Door Report, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors.